1971. I'll just show some of the photos. This is our beautiful village, one of the scenario of our village.
Is that you?
So this is a small video of our Mukti Juddha, which is the war of our liberation. I was less than 2 years then, and we had to flee to Dhaka for shelter. Our family, we had to travel by boat, sometimes during monsoon, sometimes with food without half food. We landed to Dhaka to our uncle's house and stayed for almost 1 year before we got independence and got back to home. And my, like during the war, almost every family was affected by the war, except the fact that the few collaborators and others who support the Pakistani military. But most of the families somehow affected by the war. And my father was a doctor, and middle of August, one night, he was taken by the Pakistani military, and he was taken to the Jashar cantonment. And one day he was lined up in the firing squad for shooting. So he was along with other 2 persons lined up for shooting, and he was on the right side. So the first 2 was killed, blindfolded, and my father was the next one. But somehow the military didn't shoot him and released later after the independence. But he was tortured severely, and later he was diagnosed, back pain and many other diseases. My elder brother, who was holding the cup next to me. So he actually wanted to go to the war, but he was just then 12 years old. And being the elder son of our family, my parents didn't allow him to go to the war. But he was so frustrated for not being joined the war. He was upset, and later he started writing poets about war and all about the frustration that we didn't get after the war. The expectation that we had, that we wanted to have from the war, and since he was young and he found that none of the expectation was fulfilled, so he was so upset, and he wrote a lot of poets after the situation of the war. So when I grew up, my father's involvement, my family involvement during the war, this somehow intrigued me to think about the war veterans who actually fought in the front line, who doesn't have any experience as a soldier. And many people, many civilians took part in the war, and despite of the fact that especially the women, mothers, sisters, daughters, they also somehow helped the frontline fighters, but they were not recognized as freedom fighters. That's another irony. So then when I grew up, and after the death of my elder brother, he died at very early stages. He died at only 34 years of age. But I then didn't start taking photographs. I was not a photographer then. So after the death of my brother, slowly I came to photography and I started taking photographs. But I always remembered that how could I contribute something to the war veteran, to this great war. So then I decided to do some research and found that many people, many freedom fighters who fought in the front line are being neglected by the mainstream of the society. And only 2 or 3 days of a year, they have been remembered. Only the days when, like 16th December, our Victory Day, 26th March, or Independence Day. So people only remember them only those 2-3 days. So in the meantime, I got chance to work as a fixer with a great photographer, Laurie Greenker. I don't know how many of you know her. She is a contact photographer, and she has been doing a project photographing the war veterans throughout the world. So she came to Bangladesh, and fortunately I was lucky enough to be her translator. So I took her to the war veterans, and especially to the wounded war veterans, and that's how I got a clue. I got a clue to answer how could I contribute to this war. And I always wanted to be part of this war because it's our existence and because of our family involvement. So I have decided to photograph my own war veterans who are neglected. And when first day I went to them and I approached to photograph, they simply refused me. And saying that, oh come on, you're so young. And we have been exploited by politicians, by the rich people, and even by journalists. Why should we give you permission to take photograph? But I didn't stop going there. I went there, I spent a lot of times without the camera. So initially I built up a relationship with them. And I got permission after 6 months to take photograph. So I'm going to show you that body of work, but also I would like to mention that I was also inspired by photographers like Kishore Parekh, who photographed during the Liberation War. I was inspired by our famous photojournalist Rashid Talukdar. He is also having a show at a tree gallery. I was also inspired by Donald McKillin. He is also one of the premier photographer covering different wars. So actually, this was the first exhibition in our Chobi Mela history. So my show was part of the Chobi Mela first festival in 2000. I thought this project is very important for our younger generation because history has been written by so many different ways, so many different people. And actually most of the time, the people, the common people, the civilians who are left out from the history, from the written history, from the verbal history, any sort of history, these people who actually experience, who didn't have any experience, but still they risked their life and joined war and got freedom. My exhibition got huge publicity in the newspapers, especially it was like 27 years later, someone bringing this issue and someone is talking about these people who are neglected by the mainstream of the society. So that one thing, and I think this is one of the reasons that I must bring this issue, especially for the younger generation who have no idea about the war, who have no idea about these people who are like great example for us. And then Pathshala started 1998. Our school, I was one of the first best student, privileged. Robert is here. So Robert was our teacher in 1999, but at 1998, Reza, Chris Boot were our teacher, and it was like an amazing thing. We are so excited that we are going to learn long-term photography classes, and we have our teacher, Shahidul was our full-time teacher, but then we had our teacher from UK. She's a bit older, but we had really problem with the accent. She was quite fast, so every word we had to stop her. Pardon, say it again. So that's how it started. This was one of the class, Shahidul was taking class inside the classroom. This was in 1998. The workshop, how the Pathshala started. So you can see Reza, Chris beside Reza. So that was our portfolio presentation. So I just want to say this school means a lot to me because being the first best student, then I started teaching since 2002. Then in 2009, I was the first ever vice principal at Pathshala. And now after 9 years, 2018, I became the principal of Pathshala. We got affiliation from Dhaka University. That is a great journey we have started. We have started our first batch of BSS, Bachelor of Photography in Social Science in January. But I found this journey, it's not just being as a photographer, but as a human being, and as an inspiration for many young photographer, how a photographer, how a man can be a photographer and how he can contribute, not only as a photographer, but as a social being to address certain social issues. I can remember that I used to play good football and cricket, so initially I wanted to be a player, a sports person, but my father wanted me to be an engineer, but I was very weak in mathematics. So I couldn't fulfill his desire. And finally, photography is my profession and I'm teaching now. So the school it's played a very important role in my life. And I'm sure that if there is no Pathshala, I could have been grown up as today. I'm concluding my session. I'm not sure if I take more than 10 minutes. Already, okay. So the last photograph I'm showing you was taken in 1993, and how I got to know Shahidul and how I got to this journey. So this is young Abir and young Chobi. Thank you all.
Sorry for interrupting.